Brilliant. But my name's Neil Frost. I'm CEO of Bob's Business. We are a cybersecurity awareness training company, and we work with companies across loads of different industries, not just in the cyber world. And effectively, I try and empower people to adopt really simple cybersecurity habits that improve their own individual or personal safety, and that really secures the wider business, effectively embedding really resilient and a security-first culture within organisations. So, why is cybersecurity so important? Now, most people think cybersecurity is a technology problem, but the reality is 95% of breaches in organisations involves human error. It's not because people are the weakest link, it's just they're very, very targeted by hackers, and effectively 50% of UK organisations have faced some sort of cybersecurity threat in the last 12 months, and most of that stems from phishing, which is email attacks into organisations. Now, why? Now, 43% of that metric that I've just talked about are now targeting small businesses, and because they're effectively viewed as very much the unlocked back door into those big superpower companies, small businesses tend to work with those large organisations, and they are effectively an entry point or a stepping stone into large organisations. And the reality here is data has become the biggest commodity from a global cybercrime perspective. The global cost of cybercrime now is edging towards $3 trillion a year. And that human layer is effectively the entry point for organisations, because businesses are spending millions and millions of pounds on firewalls or technology or encryption to protect organisations, but the most sophisticated entry point into an organisation is somebody who has a name, a desk, and most importantly, a real fear of making a mistake. And the reality for organisations has to be, if you've got staff who are in fear of making a mistake, then effectively you've already lost the win against hackers. Now, the solution generally for organisations is to train people, and it is a good solution. But ultimately, there can be a lie that comes with this picture right here is, I've trained 100% of my staff, so am I secure, or I should be secure, when there is a reality to that. That completion rate is the biggest lie that your organisation might face. Because all effectively you're doing is ticking a box. Compliance, and it's not just cyber training, it's any form of e-learning training or any training. It isn't just security, it's effectively just paperwork. When a training in relation to cyber is dull, people don't really engage with it. Effectively, people are clicking on things just to move past that training, and there's that false sense of security. You know, that gold star spreadsheet of completion rates is effectively a warning sign or a kick me sign for hackers to attack your organisation. So why is boring training a vulnerability? Now, it's a security gap. If the brain isn't engaged, the information stays in that short-term memory, and it's heading into the trash bin. Fear-based training is something we find in the cyber industry. Lots of talk about compliance or risk or breach, and that language in itself drives a disconnect between the actions that you want people to make and the reality. It creates anxiety. It leads to those mistakes that people will keep hidden. And effectively, we want people to report, but people will switch off. They won't report things. So stock photos of hackers attacking your organisation really does create almost a disconnect, and it makes your team treat those risks less seriously. So, What is the engagement myth? Why learning doesn't stand out, or our first instinct is often to fix the delivery method. So we think about how do we make things go from boring to really interesting. And we have to reverse engineer it a little bit. Some of the things I'm going to raise now are good things to do, but there's a step before it, because we often think, how do we make something unboring? Well, we make it more interactive, or we add some videos, or use ChatGPT or AI to make it fun. And they're valid ideas, but they miss more of a fundamental issue. And that fundamental issue around cyber is people disengage long before design becomes the problem. They don't see the point. Why is it relevant to them? So the engagement myth. How do we solve what's it got to do with them? Otherwise, what's going to happen is people are going to start thinking in a different way. All of a sudden, we're asking people to do a training on a subject that's perceived as boring or uninteresting. All of a sudden, that email inbox becomes more interesting, or that deadline you might have becomes more important, or they're thinking about what shall I do for lunch. It becomes background noise. We start to procrastinate around training, and particularly cyber. And cybersecurity is the biggest form of global crime now, and it should be important, but people are disengaging from it. And it's not just because people are difficult, it's because they're human. And we need to understand the science behind why people are interested. Reality is we're all fighting. Even today, at this wonderful arena here at the NEC, I have a cybersecurity summit downstairs. I've got a fire safety event over here. I've got a health and workplace being event here, and all of a sudden we're all fighting for attention. Now downstairs, I did a talk in the cyber room and it was full. I had people queuing out the back, so I don't think I fought too well for your attention, but that doesn't mean I don't love you for at the back there. You're really important to me. But learners are overloaded with content, so we have to make things relevant. Motivation is a starting point for learning. We have to prioritize what is important to our people. And really, everything from a learning perspective has to be around self-determination theory. And I could talk about that for hours. But in reality, people want to be in control. They want autonomy. They want to feel like they've got competency, or they're capable of learning. And they need relatedness. They need to connect with the subject that you're talking about. And that's why, as an organisation, Bob's Business, who I work for, we do awareness training and phishing simulations. We really focus on taking technical jargon and turning it into simplified language that the everyday person understands. And basically, people will engage when they believe the effort is less meaningless and they have outcomes that they can attach themselves to. And if learning isn't relevant, useful, achievable, they won't invest the time in it. So, how do I make it interesting? Now, the reality is, most e-learning or training, the first slide, and obviously from CPD and continued professional development, the first thing they ask you for is, what is your objective? But with cybersecurity particularly, we have to start with impact. Let's make mandatory training into something people actually want to talk about. That's not a drum cue for me, by the way. Relatability is king. So let's move away from that corporate talk into something that's relatable, something that people care about. Now, I call something around storytelling, I call it the fairy tale effect. I remember stories from my childhood more so than facts and figures and fear-driven content I only heard last week. So storytelling is an incredibly good way of getting people to buy into something. We're hardwired into narratives and stories. A short story about social engineering or a phishing attack is far more interesting to people than a 50-slide deck on how to make your password more secure. And ultimately, we have to go to starting with why. The brain is hardwired to think about why something's important more so than how, or how you do it. And empowerment has to be about enforcement. How do we create cybersecurity champions in our organisation, more so than treating people like a suspect who's going to make a mistake or not tell us about a mistake? Once we've fixed that, we can then start looking at some of those really cool interactive things that we should do. So at Bob's Business, we really focus when we deliver cybersecurity training, which is quite a dry subject for most people. We really focus on knowledge retention, and we can do that through contextual learning. Animation and creating relatable content and characters helps users visualize a threat, and it manifests itself into a reality for people that people can attach themselves. Or dual coding, combining visual movements and audio creates a process with cognitive learning. We cognitively attach ourselves to two different ways in which the brain can encode data or information so that we can retain information. How do we reduce cyber fatigue and anxiety? Cybersecurity is a really interesting subject, but it can be intimidating for most people. Positive and friendly, high quality animations can make people feel approachable rather than almost like Everest to them. Gamification itself can create sandbox environments where users can actually feel comfortable making mistakes without any real world consequence. And if we can do that, people can learn from mistakes. And then how do we drive that kind of behavioural change? And really innovative e-learning, not just in the cyber world, can drive things through gamification by dopamine hits, which is effectively the brain hitting you with endorphins and dopamine. And that gamified element can hit triggers a reward response into the brain, which effectively encourages users to engage with content. And if you get a win from doing something like a gamified module, that drives a conversation and competition within organisations, so they're more likely to come back to engage with more training further down the line. And again, I've mentioned really around cybersecurity, the everyday person sees it as a complex subject, but in reality, some of the actions that we look to do from a cyber perspective are actually really simple. So using animation can turn really abstract digital concepts and processes into physical metaphors that are easy for people to grasp. Something we always see from e-learning particularly is the use of long-winded e-learning courses where it's almost like a snooze fest. People switch off very quickly. So micro-learning in any learning environment is really, really effective to avoid cognitive overload. The brain itself, after 4.5 minutes, will switch off from anything. It's called cognitive overload. And we want to deliver really, really interesting subjects and high-risk subjects quickly so people can learn things that are actually relevant to them. Those instant feedback loops from gamification and animation are really, really important as well. If a user makes a mistake, the best time to give feedback is immediately, not an hour later or a day later when they've forgotten about it. We want that feedback loop to be instantaneous so that people can learn from it, such as quizzes or instant feedback, or if you click on something, maybe using a landing page to enforce information immediately to the user. And I want to talk specifically about success in the cyber world. Most of the time we hear a bad narrative about cybersecurity and how training isn't effective. But the reality is we are seeing success from cybersecurity and awareness these days. The actual risk on an individual basis is being lowered. People are getting smarter. They're recognizing more things. They're reducing their risk. But the narrative in the industry is that actually awareness and training isn't working when it actually is. The reason it's being perceived as not working is clever marketing. We're driving the narrative of more breaches means people are not actually better with their cyber hygiene. But the reason more breaches are happening is the attack surface is bigger, the types of attack are more mature, and the infancy of things of AI. We're actually seeing more attacks than ever before, so naturally we're going to see more breaches. But let's not be fooled about how effective phishing simulations, awareness, and good, careful framing of your awareness and training in a positive light can be really, really effective. And we should be championing that and talking about those positive things more so than driving fear and negativity in the awareness space. Now, those that haven't visited downstairs into the cybersecurity hall, we do have an exhibition stand where we're asking people to come and talk around their cyber confessions. Because the reality is, there is so much silence in the cybersecurity space where people make mistakes and they try and hide them or they don't talk about them. But like health and safety, if somebody did something wrong from that perspective, we would be talking about near misses so that people can learn from them. It's the same in the security space. We want to hear about mistakes so we can all, as a community, learn about them. So please visit us down in the cybersecurity hall, and I want to hear about your cyber confessions, about things and mistakes you've made, so that we can record them, talk about them, and all learn from them. Thank you so much for those that attended. Even you, sir. Thank you for turning up late. At least you turned up. That's great. Any questions from the floor, please? Brilliant. Thank you so much. Nice to see you all. Thank you.